The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Jesus came to a town of Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of land that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there. Jesus, tired from his journey, sat down there at the well. It was about noon. A woman of Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." His disciples had gone into the town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "How can you, a Jew, ask me, a Samaritan woman, for a drink?" For Jews use nothing in common with Samaritans. Jesus answered and said to her, "If you knew the gift of God, and who is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, you do not even have a bucket, and the cistern is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us this cistern and drank from it himself, with his children and his flocks?" Jesus answered and said to her, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I shall give will never thirst. The water that I shall give will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I may not be thirsty or have to keep coming here to draw water." Jesus said to her, "Go and call your husband and come back." The woman answered and said to him, "I do not have a husband." Jesus answered her, "You are right in saying, 'I do not have a husband,' for you have had 5 husbands, and the one that you have now is not your husband. What you have said is true." The woman said to him, "Sir, I can see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you people say that the place to worship is in Jerusalem." Jesus said to her, "Believe me, woman, the hour is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. Your people worship what you do not understand. We worship what we understand, because salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming and is now here when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. And indeed, the Father seeks such people to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth." The woman said to him, "I know that the Messiah is coming, the one called the Christ. When he comes, he will tell us everything." Jesus said to her, "I am he, the one speaking with you." The Gospel of the Lord. It is really awesome for me to be here, to be with you this evening, and I'm really grateful to Father Scalero, to Nick Castelli, and to all of you, the Parish of Notre Dame, for your invitation to welcome me back this evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Father John Crozier, and I'm currently the Associate Pastor of the parishes of St. Mary in East Islip and St. Peter the Apostle in Islip Terrace, way out there in Suffolk County. And I was just ordained a priest in June, and I'm sure some of you might remember I served here before my priesthood ordination as a transitional deacon from November up until COVID started to happen. So my time here with you in this parish ended quite abruptly, so it's great to be back here again to pray with you and to worship you and to see people in these pews, because the last time I was at this ambo in this church with people in these pews was way back in March. It was March 15th. It was the 3rd Sunday of Lent, and we really didn't have any idea of what was about to happen. And I remember being here and kind of getting ready for what we figured would be a few weeks of shutdown, and it was a little bit longer than that, but I'm so happy that the Lord has brought me back here and that we're back together again. You know, that March and April, those were intense days. And in some ways, we're still living in intense days. We're still figuring out how to live this new normal. And while a lot of what seems to be normal is kind of back, again, we're here together in this church, which in April seemed kind of unthinkable, so that's a blessing. And while many things do feel sort of normal again, there are certain undeniable things that aren't normal, as much as we're trying to kind of get a sense of balance and equilibrium. You know, as I think about all of that, I think about where we are right now in this month of September, and particularly this September, and even more particularly over the last couple of weeks. I've been thinking a lot about what happened in this city and in this nation 19 Septembers ago. The attacks of September 11th, 2001, perhaps still for us the most tragic experience that we've had as a nation, and I have no doubt that this community, which is so close to Manhattan and so close to the city, was rocked as hard as any other town or village here on Long Island. On 9/11 this year, I was thinking about where I was 5 Septembers ago. And 5 Septembers ago, I was in my first year in seminary up in Yonkers, up at St. Joseph's Seminary. And on the anniversary itself of September 11th, that afternoon, the rector asked one of the seminarians to speak. I was in first theology, and the seminarian that was invited to speak was in fourth theology, and he was much older than most of the guys studying in the seminary, because most of the guys, either they enter out of high school or college, or they work for a little bit and then enter the seminary. But the seminarian that spoke, his name was Tom Colucci, he had a journey and a story that was quite different than any of us in the seminary. He spent 20 years in the FDNY and retired as a captain in the fire department. And he was a first responder on that day. And the rector asked him to share his memories and his experiences as a first-hand witness to that day and to those days. And I remember he got up in front of our seminary community at lunch, and he was telling us about all of the things that we know about so well, but from his perspective. And he said, you know, the moments of horror, the moments of the planes hitting the buildings, of the buildings coming down, all of the really difficult moments were kind of like a blur. I can't really think clearly about any of those particular moments. They're all just kind of a wish-wash in my mind. But Tom then started talking about another experience he had frequently, or other experiences that he had frequently. The random acts of kindness, of goodness, of people reaching out. He talked about how one day, kind of by surprise, the New York Rangers hockey team showed up at the firehouse. And it wasn't just for like a photo op or hey, it's the Rangers. They came to bring food and to drop off supplies and to support the firefighters. And he talked about other smaller but no less significant gestures as well. Kids setting up lemonade stands outside the firehouse to raise money and to try to help out the firefighters in whatever way they could. He talked about all of the volunteers that he met down at Ground Zero. And he even talked about how, for a few weeks, on the streets of New York City and on the parkways of Long Island, you didn't hear any honking because people kind of mellowed out and they were a little bit more loving, a bit more sensitive, a bit more gentle than a rough and gruff and impatient New Yorker might be. He said the horrible moments were a blur, but the moments of goodness, they were crystal clear. Also 5 Septembers ago, a few weeks after Tom shared his testimony about his firsthand experience at Ground Zero, I heard someone else speak. It was actually 5 years ago tomorrow, I think. It was Pope Francis. He visited Ground Zero, and he visited the 9/11 Museum during his visit to America and his visit to our city. And at that museum, he said this: "Here, amid pain and grief, we also have a palpable sense of the heroic goodness which people are capable of those hidden reserves of strength from which we can draw. In the depths of pain and suffering, you also witnessed to the heights of generosity and service. Hands reached out, lives were given. In a metropolis which might seem impersonal, faceless, and lonely, you demonstrated powerful solidarity born of mutual support, love, and self-sacrifice. No one thought about race, nationality, neighborhoods, religion, or politics. It was all about solidarity, meeting immediate needs, brotherhood." I think when we think back to 9/11, we can often ask ourselves the question, why does it take a tragedy to make that unity happen? Why does it take the tragedy to bring us all together in those acts of solidarity, of brotherhood, of mutual support and love? I think what Tom Colucci was talking about, what Pope Francis was talking about, I think they were well moments. And by that I mean there were moments where our impersonal, faceless metropolis was turned into a place of companionship. It was turned into a place of mutual love, where we discovered, as the Pope said, the, quote, hidden reserves of strength from which we can draw. Because there were moments of encounter with something and someone that was so much bigger than ourselves. I remember the last time I was in this church, like I mentioned before. It was back in March. It was the third Sunday of Lent. And we didn't realize how intense our Lent was about to get. But the gospel that Sunday, back on March 15th, it was the gospel that I just proclaimed. Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well. And I think just as it did back in March, this gospel, this encounter has something to tell us as well. In this gospel, you've got a tired Jesus and a Samaritan woman who, when you think about it and you listen carefully to how she responds to Jesus, she's kind of got the edginess of a New Yorker. She wants to be left alone, which is why she goes to the well in the middle of the day. She thinks, okay, there won't be a crowd of people. I can just get in and get out. No one will look at me, and no one will talk to me, and I can just get back to my business. She wants to be anonymous and faceless. And then Jesus strikes up a conversation with her. Give me a drink. And in fact, he doesn't even say it in a polite way. He kind of demands it of her. Hey, give me a drink. Almost to kind of like break through to her, to break through that like New Yorker sensibility and mentality that she's exhibiting. And Jesus does it because he knows her. He knows that she's not just in a hurry. She doesn't have somewhere to go. She doesn't want to talk to anyone because she's carrying this shame with her. She's carrying this sadness, this self-disappointment with her. And Jesus knows he has a small shot to break through to her heart. And we see that unfold in this back and forth dialogue that almost sounds like banter at first, but then goes somewhere deeper. Give me a drink. And then she goes to him, I'm a Samaritan, you're a Jew. We don't talk to each other. And by the way, where's your bucket? You don't even have a bucket. So what's this water that you're talking about that you're going to give me? It's Jesus' way of trying to break through to her, even through the walls that she sets up through the conversation. I'm a Samaritan, you're a Jew, I'm here, you're there. I'm a woman, you're a man, just leave me alone. But what does Jesus keep doing? He pulls her facades down. He pulls down the walls. He pulls down the barriers that she puts up until all she was left with was her true self and the man sitting beside her at the well. And that's when she can finally recognize Jesus. That's when she can finally recognize him as the source of living water. Recently I was talking to a friend about that question of post 9/11 unity, and she asked the question that I just posed before. Why does it always seem like it has to take a tragedy? Why do we have to be kind of shaken to reach out to one another, to be a bit more human, to be a bit more tender? Well, maybe just as the tragedy woke us up back in 2001, and perhaps just as this pandemic has woken us up again in 2020, I think this woman at the well, in a sense, had to be woken up and shaken out of the place that she put herself in, of ignoring the presence of the one who sat right next to her. I think the wells of your life and mine, I think that's where we really learn how to pray. I'm not sure if many of you have read all or at least part of the Catechism of the Catholic Church. It's that big green book. It kind of looks like a textbook. And I know what you might be thinking. You're probably like, oh, it's just a dense, religion book. And maybe you have memories of reading the Baltimore Catechism as a child with these simple answers and statements and this sort of call and response format. Well, the catechism, the current catechism of the Catholic Church, is beautifully written, but I think the best section, and if I could recommend any part of the catechism in particular, it's section 4. It's the section on prayer. And the person that wrote the section on prayer actually used this gospel as the model of prayer. And the catechism says this: if you knew the gift of God, the wonder of prayer is revealed beside the well where we come seeking water. There, Christ comes to meet every human being. It is he who first seeks us and asks us for a drink. Jesus thirsts. His asking arises from the depths of God's desire for us. Whether we realize it or not, prayer is the encounter of God's thirst with ours. God thirsts that we may thirst for him. For us here tonight, in this church, this altar is that wellspring. We come here tonight to be with Jesus because we know that he patiently waits beside the well for us. He comes among us. He knows our needs. He knows our burdens. He knows our sorrow. And he's calling us to slowly recognize his presence. He wants to help to strip away our facades, our walls, our layers, our good face that we put out to the world. Because Jesus knows us better than we know ourselves, and he can see right through it, just as he saw right through to the heart of that Samaritan woman at the well. And he wants to say those words to you and to me that he said to that woman: I am he. I am the Messiah. The one that is speaking with you is the one that you're looking for, the one who fulfills every desire of your heart. Jesus waited at that well in that town in the hottest part of the day for that woman to arrive. He waited for her, and he waits here too. He waits at this well. He waits for you, and he waits for me. And like the Samaritan woman, he is so in love with our humanity. He's not scandalized by it, which is why when the Samaritan woman is putting up those facades, putting up those labels, putting up those qualifiers, well, I have this going on, or I have that going on, or you can't talk to me because of this reason or that reason. Jesus is saying, no, no, no. Just let it go and recognize who you're with. Jesus is like, I don't care. I'm here for you. Not because you're a Samaritan, but because of you. Because I love you. Because I've come to save you. For a few months in 2001, an impersonal, faceless, and at times aggressive metropolis that we know and love as New York became a bit more tender, became a bit more sensitive. And every time we come in contact with Jesus, here in the Blessed Sacrament, in the celebration of the Eucharist, the same transformation happens with us. Most of the time, it's not as dramatic. Almost all of the time, it's not tragic. But the transformation occurs nonetheless. Because here we encounter God in the Eucharist, in the flesh, so that like the Samaritan woman, like Tom Colucci, we might recognize the presence of goodness breaking into our lives, even through the darkness. The presence of an other, the presence of God who seeks us out, who waits for us, who longs for us, who thirsts for our relationship with him. And he does it so that we can be transformed. And like that Samaritan woman who, after that encounter with Jesus, then ran back into her town and said, let me tell you about this man who knows everything about me. Could he be the Christ? Just as it was in March, we're still in challenging times. Yes, they might not be as intense as the spring was, but there's still tough times nonetheless, and we're still making our way through this storm. They're still not easy times. How badly, then, do we need this well that, as tired and thirsty and overwhelmed as we are in the midday sun, we know that Jesus is there, that he is here, waiting for us, that his thirst meets ours, and that he encounters us not as a faceless, anonymous person, but he encounters us in the flesh, in our humanity, and he breaks down the walls that we might put up. And he does that so that he can continue to draw closer and closer to us. So this evening, go to the well. Be seen by Jesus. Let him draw close. And let his thirst meet yours.